Greetings, I'm Zephyr, and today I'm going to show you my newest track called Intricacy. This track is free to download with a link in the description below, but if you find that you want to dissect this track even further on your own time, you can consider supporting me on my Patreon. I will post my MIDI files, my audio stems, and project files for your own educational use. Alright, we'll start with the sketch. This song was composed in the scale of F minor. And the chords that I used were the 1 chord, the 2 chord, 6 chord, and the 7 chord. And that repeats across the entire progression. That's the entire progression right there. On top of that progression, I have my melody. And with those 2 pieces of information that I created with the MIDIs and the chords, I use this to create the rest of my song. With the Plucks, we're going to start here with the MIDI. And as you can see, I took the same as my sketch and I just arranged it rhythmically to make more sense with my chord progression. Interesting thing to note here with silence, if you take these MIDI notes and you work with their length, sometimes the shorter the length, it gives it this kind of swoop effect or whoosh of the filter. That's pretty unique, and it gives kind of like a kind of movement to your chord progression. You really hear it here. And by putting that in the track, it creates a more interesting kind of motion to your chord progression as it's going through the track. This is a silence patch, progressive plug. I don't think I did too much to this. This is pretty much the standard kind of, is what I start with, and I'll keep it if I like it, or I'll just move on to another sound. And I'm automating the cutoff. There's EQ. Just trim the lows out. Put some dips here to 3000 hertz area, 700 hertz. Some dips there. This is all kind of just to taste, what I heard when I was messing with it. This love filter is a high pass. And I use that high pass for when I start bringing the cutoff up or adding effects, I'll start turning a high pass on so it doesn't get too crazy in the mix. And then that effect, this effect is just, it's running to a delay. So here's the Plucks, and it's running over to the delay, and this turns up. And this is just a standard delay setting. I think 4 as the time, some feedback going on, nothing too special. There is the high pass I was telling you about, and then of course there's a little bit of volume, because when it starts increasing in the cutoff, the volume starts to increase as well. So I'll do some like, automation mixing where I automate the volume down to make it still sound kind of even in the mix. This is the second Plucks. This is my second layer here. And you can see this it's slightly different from the original MIDI setting, as I took out mostly the bass notes. And so it's more like a just the chord section, and it's really fluffy and airy. And it's just a copy paste over. I found a Nexus preset that I liked. I trimmed this. Usually I turn off the reverb, but I do keep delay and kind of edit that as well. And then sometimes I'll automate the cutoff in Nexus, depending on what I want to do to it. Here it is to a mixer track, and it's not even... Oh, okay. I was like, there's no volume on it. It's just really low. I mixed it really low, and I had it running to a reverb, but the reverb is off. I think it was a little bit too much. And then it's running to my Plucks bus, which is running to through a VC2A compressor, which this isn't even pushing it, but when both of these are playing at the same time, the compressor starts to move, so it's starting to give it a little bit of color. There's some post EQ on the bus, all these on the bus afterwards, which runs into my synth bus, which also has a VC2A. And this is just mainly just to keep things under control so nothing gets untamed. Now we'll move on to the Arp section. I use 3 different Arps here in this track. I'm actually a big fan of using Arps and trying to find like creative ways to implement them. The first one is this one right here. And I just basically created that to complement the chord progression. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. I just started playing around till I found that little ditty, and then I just went with it. As usual, I turned off the reverb, and then I usually mess with the delay, and also the cutoff is being automated or controlled here because it's on. I'm running that to mixer track with just some EQ applied to it. This is completely to taste. And then we have my second Arp here. I think this is a more like a muted version of the first one. Wait, let me double check. No, it's different. It's different. Okay, okay. But this is more like a kind of like an undertone Arp that matched this one. So they just made sense together in context. And these little lines here, they're just filtering. I'm controlling the filter what I feel like it should be sound like as this comes in. My third Arps, I think this is probably my favorite one. This is a silence patch, Echo Halls. Just found it, kind of perusing around. I think I left the reverb on because it just sounded good the way it was, and then there's some delay, of course. Approach the mixer track here. There's going to be some EQ, just to taste. Mostly just trimming out the lows, as you can see, and I boosted a little bit of the mids. Some stereo shaping, about almost 8 milliseconds to the left, and then sidechain, of course. you can see that basically the Plucks and the Arps, you know, that's like the I don't know, it's like the, you know, the description of the chord progression, you know, this describes it. And the Arps really are just the thing that brings it out, especially in mellow prog. I feel like if you have your Arps working with you in the song melodically, it just adds a whole new level of things you could add to your song. Now we start on the pads. Alright, it's just a kind of basic silence pad that I found. Really enjoyed this one, so I just rolled with it. Mixer track is just EQ. Just some EQ applied. And then some stereo shaping as well. This is about 3 milliseconds to the left. And the cool thing about this one, why I like using this one, is because the motion it makes when you sweep the filter. You can notice that here. It just sounds really nice, and it kind of helps. I did it right there before the ending of the last bar to kind of give it a little whoosh into the next little section. It's kind of like reminds me of like a wave kind of crashing or something. You know, that's kind of my idea behind it. So the filter is being automated to make those whooshy sounds, and I've kind of just did that individually throughout it. And I didn't do it too often. I just did it like right in the verse because, you know, it was like a way to bring out the character of your pad without you having to do anything but just kind of move a knob. There's some volume automation going on, just kind of in different parts of the song where I felt like it needed to be at. And that's it. Really simple kind of setup, but it's still pretty powerful just using a simple pad and controlling the cutoff. It adds a lot. So this is all the stuff that happens here is all kind of meant to benefit the melody. There's two major kind of things going on. Obviously the little guitar, and then of course there's this little fluty sound here. That's just kind of it's just going to bring out and kind of put a little sparkle in the elements of the verse as it's playing. Here is the guitar sample. Not sample, but I guess sound. It's a mix of Nexus, 4 Nexus patches, just with layers on them. Some of them might have like slightly different volumes and slightly different kind of notes, but ideally they're all pretty much the same. And then this is just these two are where the mixer tracks are routed to. There's some EQ here, which nothing's going on, but the important thing is there's no side chain on that. Same here, there's some EQ, some stereo, and the side chains turn off as well. The little flute section here. There is some EQ applied to that. Some volume automation, that's what the syn is for. And it's routed to my reverb, which that gets, I think, controlled a little bit more as the bridge goes into effect. And let's just listen to that little flute part in context here. And I think stuff like that is really, really good to do in like your verse section of the song. So not when like a whole bunch of stuff was going on at the same time, like your chorus or your drop, but it's this for your verses and sections like that. I think it's really cool if you try to play around with different instruments and just be very carefree with how you do it and make it fit in stylistically, because that's exactly what I did. I just took the flute and I just played around with like some notes in the scale, and I was like, ooh, I like that. I'm gonna roll with it and just make that fit, But obviously, it can't like play it too much throughout the track because it's very unique and it's designed to kind of stand out. You don't want it taking up the whole track. So there's more variation to the flute here. And this little lead 3 part is just a kind of like a layer on top of these guitars that are playing. And that constitutes the whole entire melody there. As far as it's broken down in my arrangement, you can kind of see here where I just start introducing in it in bits as the song starts to progress. So this little ditty right here, you can see like I'm just using that same sound over and over and over to kind of get you ready for it. And then it kind of it comes in more in the verse here, teases you a little bit more, comes in here, and this number 2 means I added some variation to it. So I just took the MIDI notes, and these aren't the exact same copy, but I just kind of edited some things and changed it around to make it interesting for the second part. And then as the verse comes back in, it plays the whole entire spiel, and then it sort of leads out. So it's kind of like a point to everything. Those are only for like the intro kind of portions of your track, but it's still the melody. So, you're still not like creating anything new. You're just using what you already have, and you're just using it kind of creatively to extend it out for, 4 or 5 minutes. Now onto the bass. This is a harmless patch that I've created, and I usually just design these from scratch as the song goes. I typically don't work with the basses until the chords and the melody, or at least the chords are already set in place, and then I'll start working on the bass. So this is just entirely what I felt sounded good as I was sound designing. The major things to notice here is that it has two unison, 2 voices. The pan's down a little bit. The cutoff frequency is down, 30% or so. Filter envelope's about 50%. Plucks down to about 40. There is some increasing. I increased the volume levels on the subharmonics, the first and the third subharmonic, and that's it. There's nothing else done to this. And oh yeah, it's also a square. So I mean, but I guess that that sounds very squarey, and that's what I want to go with. I really like doing that with basses. That's just my way of doing it. I'm really simple too when it comes to them. If you haven't noticed, just some EQ down here, and I don't even think there's any. Oh, okay, well there is some compression going on. So VC76, some post EQ, and then this love filter is for high passing, which it high passes here. And that's useful for kind of like turning down your bass as it's approaching your next section. The MIDI notes are the exact same as my sketch or my Plucks, just built in the same rhythmic fashion. And there is nothing much else. Oh, the second part of the bass, this is a sustain one. And honestly, what I do is I clone the patch, and then I edit the parameters a little bit more because I want it to still be the same, but I just want to make like a longer drawn out version of the bass. when I'm making like the breakdown or bridge section. So I copy pasted it over, and then I'll start changing some parameters. Like I made it a saw, I increased the third harmonic a little bit, turned off any kind of filter envelope. I don't want the bass plucking in a bridge. I just want it sustaining all the way through. And then that bass is routed to its mixer track with some EQ applied, a little slight dip right there. The send is for volume automation. Which is done here. All right, now we'll work on the vocals. And that's pretty much repeated throughout the entire section of the track. So it's a really short kind of repetition, but it's just more for like, you know, putting the flavor of the vocal sound into the track. Because, you know, a mellow prog track with vocals in it just really is like the top of the cake, you know. And if I can find a way to squeeze some vocals into them, you know I'm going to try. So I believe this is just one sample. And what I did was I chopped out little bits and pieces of it. See if I can. Well, I chopped out little tiny pieces of it and just kind of put it through a load of like reverb and delay just to kind of see where to fit. So if we turn off the this is the same thing. It's just slowed down when I play it like that, but it is the same vocal, and it's just little bits and pieces of it I chopped and just kind of set it in where I thought. Ran it through my mixer track, and then there's just of course some EQ, the delay, which is important. Without the delay, the vocals will just kind of disappear really quickly. And then a love filter, which is a high pass, some stereo, and it's running through the sidechain as well. And notice like the volume is really low. I want it to kind of creep in, not just be like on top of the mix. I like creeping vocals in and arps in a lot. I'll creep them in more than like the other things. It's the clap. Out is super trimmed out of here on the clap. I do the same thing. I'll trim the out on the claps as well. Claps or snares. Some EQ applied. There's nothing done here. This is just the way it was, but it's routed to my snare bus, which is routed to my drum bus, which there is some post-processing done on that. We'll get to that in a minute. Hi-hats. You got just kind of like a basic little sound, and then this is a little accent. Same here. Those three kind of make up one part of the groove, and they're all routed here to an EQ track, which that should be done. I just didn't do it, you know. And then that's routed to the hat bus, which has a little overall volume control on it that I use to control throughout various parts of the track. Second version of my hi-hats are here. You can see that there's some rhythm applied to the velocities for both of them, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And then those are routed to their own EQ and hat bus as well. And then we have the percussions. And then how I came up with this little kind of creation or, you know, ditty on it was most of it was just kind of experimenting around and playing around. And also sometimes I'll load up like all these on like the Kai Fire, and kind of play around with it on there just to see if I can create an interesting groove. The important thing is you just kind of keep some kind of, you know, like, I don't know how to explain it, but more like kind of like a consistent rhythm, yet still, you know, dancing around a little bit. And that's what this was for. Ran through an EQ, some EQ applied to it, and also I believe this is going to, yeah, it's going to the reverb. And then there's some stereo applied overall to the final, to the bus, reverb, stereo, and then some post EQ. And all together. And then here we have a snare. It's pitched up a little bit here. And then I just have it on a mixer track, but there's no EQ or anything applied to it. It's real low, and basically it's giving it a little bit more power to the overall. This little bit right here is just a kind of it's like you know, like my little flourish at the end of each little 4 bars. I always add something I can. A little reverse, and then just a little a little ride. And it's applied to its own reverb because I just want it to be kind of like, I want to kind of tailor that reverb for that specific one. That's when I usually do that. And then some EQs applied. And that makes up the entire section. I don't think I use any other instruments other than some sound effects, which we'll get to. All right, on to the effects now. We have your standard kind of crashes. Low down lifter. A random, mysterious, spooky effect. A 3x OSC white noise that's modulating the X and Y filter. Quite easy stuff. And then some more reverse symbols here. A bird sound effect. And we're going to hear that in context here. And, you know, what you can kind of tell is it just kind of creates a little bit of sparkle to the atmosphere that's already there. I kind of imagined it being more like taking a breath in, hearing the birds and the seagulls, and then blowing it out, and then back to reality or back to the music or back to whatever you're doing. And then I'm also a big fan of like these kind of atmospheric sounds, like, you know, nature sounds, birds, rain. But I also don't want to like overdo it with my track. You know, I want to find like really creative ways to just kind of throw those in there without it being too much. And it's really just an event. It's not a good event just for, you know, what's happening in this verse or, you know, the bridge section, or, you know, it doesn't really happen too many times. It's good to kind of like, you know, see what you can do. Just be creative and throw some variation into like your verse by simple like atmospheric kind of additions. All right, this last little sound here is just another riser effect. And I'm automating the amount of the LFO that gets applied to the X filter, mod X filter of the sound, which gives it that kind of, you know, wobble at the end. And it's just mixed in to kind of give a little bit of help to the transition as it transitions from the intro section into the verse. And then that's really it. The rest of this is just volume automation, of course, and then there's some more white noise applied in sort of like the bridge section of the track. There is a little bit for my sound effects. There's just a little bit of volume automation going on here and EQ. Basically, this is all I do. I just link it to a mixer track. I'll EQ them if they need to be, like that one needed to be, but this one didn't. But I had to automate the volume, you know, for ease of access, you know, just having them all grouped together, and then I can control the knobs individually like that. The miscellaneous tab is just for like when I do kind of sound design creations. I'm not very good at it, so I kind of dedicate a whole kind of group to it so I can really get creative and mess with it without impacting the rest of the track. That little wobbly sound that I showed you, this is just running it through some distortion and then some post EQ afterwards because you introduce some extra kind of frequencies when you distort. Now I'm going to talk about my mixer here and just kind of how it was all laid out. I have all my instruments all routed to their own kind of group: plucks, arps, pads, leads, melodies, basses, vocals, etc. And that's where I do my EQ and kind of major heavy stuff there. Here it's just mostly light work and compression for my buses. So I typically will run them through a little like VC2A or something similar and just add light compression just to sort of make them more even and turn them up a little bit in the mix without impacting too much headroom. And then there's some post EQ, of course, as well. And then all of these little buses are routed to a master kind of synth bus where I've applied some post EQ afterwards. And then I also apply some compression as well. These are all set to taste. There's no specific numbers that I use. I just kind of trim them as I do each project individually. So they're my overall synth group. And then there's my overall bass group, which I have some EQ as well, running it through a VC76. And then I'm running it through a high pass, the low filter high pass. And then my drum bus, running it through some EQ. I was using a limiter. I was testing out the difference between using like a compressor and a limiter and just seeing what the difference would be, and it was quite a difference. So I liked how this compressor sounded. I kept it, and then I'm running it through an imager, which I'm just using it to kind of add a little bit of more space to the upper sections of the frequency. You can kind of see that happening here. And then the band one width is kind of narrowed down just a little bit. So it's just more for like, almost like mid-side, but not quite. It's just a way to, you know, make it sound certain elements of the whole entire drum bus sound brighter. A sound effects mix, nothing going on. And then vocal mix, there was a lead filter on it, but there's nothing going on as well, just some EQ. And then I route that all out to the pre-master, into the submix, into the pre-master, and then into the master finally. For my reverb, I have everything that I want to use reverb for. Route it to my verb send here, which I trim off the lows to anything that comes into the reverb unit, running it through a Valhalla shimmer. So I have all the mix at 100%. And then I turn down the shift because I don't want the pitch changing too much as the stuff's going on. But the rest of this is all to taste. I don't trim too much unless it's something specific I'm trying to do, or I'm like, oh, I want to run this bass through here, but I don't want low in it, so I'll turn the low cut up a little bit. And then after that, I'm running through some post EQ where I'm isolating out just kind of like this section of the reverb frequency because that's where I want the reverb to shine the most. And then that's going through some side chain that's playing. The delay, my delay send, it's just a delay 3 bank here. This is free with the new version of FL, and it's actually really nice. I've found some really cool things you can do with it, but its ease of use also is amazing. So it's just kind of set to your standard kind of settings. Feedback's not even that high. There's no cutoff or anything applied to that. Nothing extra going on here. Just some EQ cutting out the lows before they hit the delay bank, and then that's it. It's just out into the world. Master, on the master, there's usually nothing on the master that I keep except for a Voxingo span and a limiter, which the limiter is just to kind of bring it up to, normal listening levels. This is me not, I mix very, very low, so I always have to turn my stuff up overall, and just hear it kind of turned up, and then I turn it back down and mix low. It's just a trick I've been doing for quite some time now. And that's the entirety of my setup, but please let me know if you have any questions about this. All right, that explains the entirety of my track Intricacy, which is out now for free download down in the link below. I just want to give a special thank you to all my patrons who have decided to support me and support my journey and support my work. Words can't express how much I appreciate your help. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope that this was educational to you. If you enjoyed it, just let me know what you think about it. Share it out to people you think might could use this. And if you still want to support me in any way, form, or fashion, you can find out much more information about that on my Patreon page. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for hanging with the Cool Breeze.